This is Family Voices with Patty Barron. It is my honor to have as our guest today Mrs. Ginger Perkins, an Army spouse for 38 years who moved over 20 times. She is an Army mother and spouse ambassador. She has thrived through multiple deployments of both her husband and children and many separations by being resilient and investing in her family and the Army. Ginger and her husband, General David Perkins, USA retired, have a daughter and son. Their daughter is a Black Hawk helicopter pilot with 2 combat tours to Afghanistan. Their son is a West Point graduate and combat engineer who has recently transitioned to civil engineering in a civilian firm. For the past decade, Ginger's passion has been teaching Army spouse customs and traditions to battalion and brigade level command spouse teams at the pre-command course, post-level ACS events, Army conferences, as well as senior executive spouse courses. Ginger, welcome to our podcast. We are so excited to have you join us.
Oh, Patty, it is my pleasure and honor to be with you today.
We're just thrilled, Ginger. And first and foremost, how are you and General Perkins doing way up there in New Hampshire?
We are thriving here in the Northeast Kingdom after a long winter. Definitely looking forward to summer. We are in a rural area that's categorized as New England mountain resort. We went from packed official calendars to busy personal schedules of building a home, planning and executing wedding, writing 2 books, along with setting up an LLC for David. He's consulting on boards and doing some nonprofit work, but I say I went from high heels to mud boots.
I know that's true, Ginger. I've seen some of the photos of your property up there in New Hampshire, and you are out there. As a matter of fact, I think you mentioned to me that one day you stumbled across a bear in your walks in the woods.
Oh, yes. We have bear, porcupine, skunks, and other animals.
Oh, well, I'm sure it's a lot of fun and also maybe very exciting when you do stumble across some of that wildlife. But I think that's awesome. That's so great. I love the high heels to mud boots for sure. Ginger, anyone that knows you knows that you are a warm, elegant person who is a walking encyclopedia when it comes to military customs and courtesies. We all love and count on you for that. What started your passion for this subject?
Well, I started dating David at West Point in 1979. We got married and went straight to Germany without any military background. It was there I was exposed to coffees and teas and changes of commands and dining outs and the New Year's reception. Those experiences are what introduced me to the Army traditions and taught me to value the culture that my husband and I had become a part of. I worked as a civil servant for a battalion commander, brigade commander, division commander, and then the chief of staff at West Point. I collected all the social guides and programs and DA pamphlets and DA regulations, along with my first book, the Army Wife Handbook, creating my Army spouse library, and then worked with great protocol offices and executive services. Little did I know that eventually David would become a battalion commander and then to the 4-star level commander. Along the way, I started updating and writing the unit social guides. I was asked to present at the pre-command course at Fort Leavenworth, where I brought my father's beat-up, rusty toolbox full of all those guides. That is where I started my Tools for Your Toolbox presentation.
I remember that presentation. We asked you to come to one of our AUSA annual meetings and help us out with a new event that we were calling the Munch and Mingle. And you graciously agreed to present. And it was so much fun. It really, really was. And when you and I first began to discuss the creation of Customs, Courtesies, and Traditions of the United States Army, a primer for families, we had parents of soldiers and spouses new to the Army in mind. And I couldn't think of a more perfect person to help us with this book than you. Why do you think these groups would find the book helpful?
Well, this book is really for family members and anyone interested in this great Army, whether they have a soldier in it or not. It's to equip, empower, and give them the necessary tools for their toolbox. Army family members wear many different hats, but what we all have in common is we are all Army spouses or Army family members and need to build camaraderie and esprit de corps to support each other and our soldiers. So in this book, they'll find the tools to understand and embrace the customs and courtesies and traditions of the U.S. Army, the reason why we do certain things, And a couple of my favorite examples are the tradition of bestowing unit crest pins at coffees. This tradition traces back to World War I, where wives, sisters, and girlfriends commonly wore pin brooches given to them by their soldiers that depicted the miniature badges of the units in which their loved ones were serving. The phrase "sweetheart brooch" was commonly used, but now, as a token of welcome, military spouses traditionally give a miniature unit crest pin or tie tack to a new spouse when he or she joins a coffee group or FRG. Another favorite example is why the silver outrank gold in an officer insignia. Well, originally the insignia was brass plated with a nickel base, and majors and second lieutenants had no specific insignia to designate their rank. And over time, the brass became worn and the silver-colored base became visible, creating the impression that officers with worn rank had turned silver and had grown wise and more experienced. When the Army added specific rank insignia for those second lieutenants and majors, they remembered this older custom by choosing brass-colored rank that would eventually mature into the silver color. And my last example for that is the silver dollar salute. It's an honor tradition that a newly commissioned second lieutenant proudly hands a shiny silver dollar to the first enlisted soldier who salutes him or her. The British officers stationed in colonial America would be assigned an enlisted soldier to train him, teach him regimental history and traditions, and ensure that his equipment met appropriate standards. Those grateful lieutenants often showed their gratitude with a modest monetary compensation. In the 1800s, American second lieutenants received a monthly base pay that included $1 designated for an enlisted advisor. This pay was later discontinued, but the training of new second lieutenants by enlisted soldiers continues, and so does the present-day tradition of the silver dollar salute. In the Army, it is said that you have to buy your first salute and then earn every salute thereafter through your performance and by gaining the respect of your subordinates.
Those are such great stories and traditions of why we do things. And I think that the folks that purchase our book will just learn so much. But one of the things that they'll learn are the practical applications coming into an Army family, whether as a parent or a new bride. I remember when I was a young spouse and I attended a change of command, I sat in the back row and watched the senior spouses in the front row intently so that I would know what to do. A quick reference book like this would have been so helpful. But if I needed to dive deep into a topic, I always turned to my Army Wife Handbook written by Anne Crossley. And I was so excited to see that it has an updated version now called the Army Spouse Handbook that just rolled out. And Ginger, you were one of the main contributors working with Mrs. Crossley on this book. What was the experience like, and what can you tell us about this new version?
Well, Patty, it was a labor of love that took over 2 years. I worked with about 20 other contributors, male, female, officer, enlisted, soldier, spouse, active duty, and retired. And we took a chapter, reviewed it, updated it, researched, and then reviewed again. And it was wonderful to work with such a legend as Anne Crossley, the original author of the Army Wife Handbook and the Air Force Wife Handbook. She was very open to the updates and revisions, from calling cards, changing it to business cards, receiving line guidance, including spouses, hence the name change to Spouse Handbook, adding changes of responsibilities, updates to invitations and dress attire. But some descriptions in the book are still traditional, like the tea. Spouses know that they can personalize it and adapt it to modern twists. It is the ultimate social resource guide.
It truly, truly is. Anything that I ever needed to know, I could find in that book. And I actually have the newer copy and gifted one to my daughter, who is an Army spouse. She also happens to be a veteran and served in her own right. And at first she looked at it and said, "Oh, thanks, Mom." But then a few months ago, she called me and she said, "Thanks, Mom," when it was her turn to have to host a battalion commander to the unit because she was the XO's wife. So I know she has really come to appreciate how wonderful that book is. And as a matter of fact, you can purchase the Army Spouse Handbook through your spouse community club or on their website. And we will make sure that that link to that website is on our description of this podcast. But Ginger, I also wonder how your own kids have embraced their mother's passion for traditions.
Well, our children actually helped me edit the book to make it relative to the current generation. 21st Century Guide for the 21st Century Spouse. Our daughter did most of the bottom line up front. And one example is, shake hands as you would hold a dove, not too strongly that you would kill the bird, and not too lightly that it would fly away. I speak with our children routinely and we discuss the traditions as they are the boots on the ground.
You're so right, Ginger. I speak to my daughter and her friends and many of the children of my friends who have gone into the military for their advice and also their perspective. It's so important that we keep up to date with how things are done now in our Army. But we also find ourselves in a tradition that goes back many years, and that would be the Army birthday. It's being celebrated quite differently at Army installations all over the world now. And if you were to get a call from, let's say, an installation commander that would ask you for some advice, what would you not leave out if you were to do a virtual Army birthday ceremony? Which ones of these traditions that are included in our book would you pick and why?
Well, Patty, there are definitely a few that stand out that are close to my heart. The first one is the punch bowl ceremony, because the unit's history is recited, and it can be customized for your own particular unit. So during the recitation, spirits are added to the punch, and each edition represents a campaign or ribbon in a unit's history. This is all carried out with flair and pomp and circumstance. And at an Army ball, the master of ceremonies will read a narration of the history of the American soldier and the battles in which the soldiers have fought since the Revolutionary War. As each conflict is described, a soldier will add a special ingredient to that punch bowl. The other one is the Fallen Heroes table, because we should always honor and remember. Fallen Soldiers table is also called MIA, POW, Fallen Heroes table, or a Missing Man table. This is a table display at military balls, reunions, and other formal occasions that honors the soldiers who have given their lives for our country. You may have seen this at restaurants during Memorial Day weekend. From the white tablecloth, red rose, slice of lemon, pinch of salt, tapered candle to the inverted wine goblet, everything has significance. For instance, the wine goblet is inverted to symbolize the soldier's inability to share the evening's toast. And traditionally, the attendees raise their glasses, but they do not drink as they observe a moment of silence in honor of the fallen.
This is such a beautiful tradition and one that I certainly always look for whenever we attend an event. It's so important to remember our fallen. And I would also say that you had told me a story about a table that was set with all the dignity and all the pomp that is deserved. But there was someone in that room that kept doing something to your table. Do you want to share that with our audience?
Sure. I actually was at a restaurant, and it was a beautifully set table and had all the right elements. But when people kept walking by, they would see that goblet inverted, and the servers or people, they would just turn it upside down. They didn't realize that that was such a special table. I mean, other times, they'd walk by and maybe put a discarded plate there, and it really would just break my heart. So it is one of those traditions that to tell other families about that, because we really do need to keep that sacred.
I absolutely agree. And that's why I'm so excited that this particular tradition is highlighted in the book. But I also think, I know I've seen it at other tables, an explanation of what everything means on the table. And so that's helpful to civilians that might not be familiar with it. Now, we're in the COVID-19 era, and we don't really know at the time of this taping what June, July, August are going to look like. And it's having such an impact on us right now. And I imagine that some of these courtesies might change somehow. They might change forever. So what would you tell a new command team to never give up, no matter what, in terms of our changing environment?
Well, definitely welcoming folks, welcoming people to the unit. You only get one chance to make a first impression of welcoming newcomers to the unit. It can be as simple as a phone call, a note, an email, a Facebook SFRG welcome. Share your contact information as well as community numbers and rosters. Just reach out. Some units have a standardized welcome packet with a welcome basket. The other one is connecting with the other unit spouses, whether it's Zoom, webinar, Business Live, Facebook for coffees, and SFRGs. And the last one is sharing of information. My husband always says, becoming informed is a proactive sport. It's important for units to get the official word out by sharing their official Facebook page through text or email.
Ginger, I could not agree more. That welcome is so important. To feel that you're a part of the unit, our Army culture and tradition really sets us up to embrace the unit history, to be a part of a bigger team. And I think all of the spouses, whether they're enlisted or officer, really do much better when they all know each other and can really support each other. So I agree with you. That welcome is so important. Ginger, you've been such an awesome guest. I knew you would be. As we conclude our podcast today, do you have any final remarks for our listeners?
Well, Patty, thank you so much for having me. And really from my heart, thank you and AUSA for allowing me to share all those traditions, the customs, courtesies, and traditions of the U.S. Army. And a final thought for people to keep in mind, even when they are reading this book, is to be gracious in all that you do, whether it is online or in person. As Maya Angelou has stated, people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I just feel it's best to do the wrong thing graciously than the right thing rudely.
Ginger, I've known you for a few years now, and I can't tell you what a role model you have been for me in graciousness and tact and traditions, and just a role model of a senior spouse. And we are so thrilled that you were able to join us here today. I just love chatting with you. Thank you, Ginger. You can purchase the Customs, Courtesies, and Traditions of the United States Army, a primer for families, at the AUSA store, which is at our AUSA website, www.ausa.org. And you will also be able to find the link in the comment sections below. Thank you all so much for listening today. And Ginger, thank you for being such an awesome guest.
To all our listeners, thanks for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to the Army Matters podcast on iTunes and everywhere podcasts are found. Join us next Monday with a brand new episode of Army Matters with thought leaders. The Army Matters podcast series is brought to you by the Association of the United States Army, the U.S. Army's professional association, member-supported, Army-connected. Visit us at ausa.org for more information or to become a member. Your membership helps AUSA continue to carry out its mission to educate, inform, and connect with the total Army, our industry partners, and our supporters of a strong national defense. For questions or to provide topic recommendations, email us at podcast@ausa.org. Have a great Army Day. Hua.